Hi guys, Russell here from homebrewrepublic.co.nz. How you going? Welcome to today's brew review. Today we're checking out the Black Rock Miners Stout. We're going to make two brews, a basics brew and a recipe brew. Let's get into it. Hey guys, Russell here. Welcome officially to the brew review. Today, of course, we're checking out the Black Rock Miners Stout. First question, what are we actually brewing? According to the description on the label, the West Coast coal miners drink at the end of the day. Dark, smooth and satisfying. I did see in another description online that this kit is regarded as having really dark and rich malt flavors, which of course we would expect from a stout, and the flavor profile is regarded as being really well balanced and having moderate bitterness. So the moderate bitterness piece, this kit has an IBU or international bitterness units of 30, so very much in that moderate space. The SRM, which is color, is 50, so of course being a stout, expecting a very, very dark finish, and the target ABV for the kit by itself is 4.5%. So what are we doing today? We're going to do two brews. We're going to do a basics brew where we get this kit on the simplest, the most cost-effective, the easiest way possible, and see what we get on the other side. Then we're going to do a recipe brew where we combine this with some other ingredients to see if we can get a brew of our own, a craft style brew, and go from there. Let's get into the basics brew. The basics brew today, as always, is super simple. The only other ingredient we need to get this beer on is a source of fermentable sugar for fermentation. We'll touch on that in a second. Other than that, this is a fairly standard malt extract kit. As I said before, yeast under the lid. The suggested temperature range for fermentation is fairly consistent with other extract kits. The recommended temperature range is 18 to 22 degrees. I'm going to brew this in ambient temperature. I've just gone autumn, so I suspect this will quite comfortably go through on probably about 22 degrees if I was to guess. But anywhere down that low end is always going to give you, or not always, but is going to help you get a good result out of these kits. So the source of fermentable sugar, this guy right here. You've got a couple of options. You can go for dextrose, which would be your most cost-effective option. I've really gone towards the liquid brewing sugar. Same result in terms of dextrose, where this is 100% fermentable. What I like about this though is it gives a far cleaner finish on the flavor profile when compared to dextrose. So for me, it just lifts the quality of the finished product a bit and gives a nicer outcome. Overall though, what I'd be expecting with this brew is a reasonably light-bodied, crisp and clean finish on our stout. So we'll get this brew on and then we'll check out what we get on the other side. Welcome to the recipe brew, guys. What I've settled on for this review is a coffee cream stout. So here's what I want to go for. Obviously, being a stout, we're really wanting to bring through those rich, dark, roasted malt characters. I want to get a real depth, that flavor profile going on. I want to build up a medium bodied beer, and I want to go for a silky smooth finish on the mouthfeel and bring through a little bit of extra sweetness just to round off the flavor profile with the dark roasted malts, and also to help draw through the coffee tones that we're going to use. I am going to try and give this a very, very small hint of caramel. I'll talk to you about how I do that. And from an ABV perspective, I'm going to try and lift this up to around about the 6.5 to 7%, but we'll see where we get to on the other side. Let's talk about the ingredients we're going to use in addition to the Black Rock Miners Stout Malt Base Kit. This is the first additional ingredient. I'm going to use 1.7 kgs of the Black Rock dark liquid malt extract. Now this is going to do a couple of things for me. Number one, we're adding additional malt extract, so we're going to really build up those rich dark roasted malt characters. We're going to give some more intensity and some more depth to those flavors. The other thing that this is going to help us do is build up the body in the beer to give us that medium body and start building up that really nice smooth finish for us. The next ingredient is hopefully what is going to be one of the things that makes or breaks this brew. I'm going to use coffee beans in the brew. Small plug, I love coffee, and I would joke that hot brews in the morning, cold brews for the afternoon. If I was making a really bad joke, I would say the most difficult time of day is between 12 and 5 p.m. Too late for coffee, too early for beer. Either way, this here is from Atomic, and Atomic is my favourite coffee roaster. I can't get away from them, and in particular this brew here, which is Velocity. So if you like coffee, I really encourage you to give that a go. They're based in Kingsland and Auckland, really, really awesome. What I'm going to do with these, I've got 165 grams here. Now, I've seen recipes where these just get chucked in as beans. I'll use that term loosely, chucking, and I'll talk about that in a second, where they get put in as whole beans. What I think I'm going to do is get a rolling pin and just break these up a little bit. The other option is actually running them through a grinder and getting but if you do that, go for a really, really coarse finish, because what we want to do when we add these to the brew is put them in using a hop sock so that we can contain the organic matter and not let that get through our brew. I don't know what this would do, like whether it sinks or floats or anything like that. So I'm using a hop sock, which is what most of the other recipe approaches I've seen online suggest. I did say that I was going to crunch these a little bit with the rolling pin. The reason I'm doing that is just to break them up a little bit and make it easier for the flavour to really get pulled out by the brew as it's fermenting. However, I have seen recipes just talk about putting whole beans in. So what you want to do there, completely your call. As I said before, I'm using 165 grams, which is the equivalent of 6.6 grams per litre. Now, if you happen to do the maths on that, what I'm going to do is do a 25 litre brew, not the standard 23 litres. So that's how I've got to 6.6. I was cautioned, originally I was planning on using 200 or 250 grams. I was cautioned against that because it is quite a strong flavour. One of the recipes I found online, it was down at the 150 level. So yeah, bear that in mind if you try that at home. Other than that, I think that's really all there is to say. Fresh coffee beans available otherwise from your supermarket. Let's check out the next ingredients. The next ingredient, guys, is liquid brewing sugar, 1 kg. So remember, the target ABV on the kit is 4.5%. We are already using the liquid malt extract, which is going to help us get somewhere between 4.5% and 5% on ABV. So adding an extra 1 kg of fermentable is going to give us an additional 1 to 2% of ABV. So what I'm really looking for here is for this component to help lift us up to around about the 6 to 6.5%. Now, I did mention before total ABV, I'm looking for hopefully between 6.5% and 7%. So I've got one more ingredient I'm going to add to help bring that up. I'll talk about that soon. As mentioned, this guy here, 100% fermentable, but the other reason I like him is he's not going to do anything to the flavour profile. So it's going to give us that really clean finish, and I can let the other ingredients do their job and bring through the flavours that I want them to. The only piece of advice I'm going to give with this is it's really, really thick and really gloopy. Make sure you get it into a bowl of hot water and give it a real good chance to soften up before you go to use it, at least 15 to 20 minutes. We're down to the last few ingredients we're adding in. This one right here is 500 grams of lactose. Now, there's a few reasons why I want to use this. Number one, it's non-fermentable. So what that means is it's going to do nothing for our alcohol by volume or our ABV. The first thing it's going to do though is affect our flavour profile. Now, if we look at what we're doing, we've got really rich, dark, roasted malt characters. We're bringing in another strong flavour profile with the coffee. What this is going to do is give us a good level of sweetness on the brew. So what I'm looking for it to do is really round out that flavour profile and draw out the coffee flavour a little bit more for us. The next thing this is going to do, and actually this is how we're able to call this a coffee cream stout. If we didn't add the lactose, we'd just be doing a coffee stout. It's because of this we're able to call it a coffee milk stout or a coffee cream stout. This is going to impact the finish on the brew, the mouthfeel, and generally speaking what lactose is regarded as doing is giving a real silky smooth finish on the brew. So we're building up a little bit of a medium body, and then what I want to do is use this lactose to make it real silky smooth and go down super nicely. Alright guys, last ingredient here. What this is raw sugar straight out of the pantry. When I say raw sugar, it's the brown crystals that we commonly see go into coffee. In this case, I wouldn't use brown sugar. Brown sugar is more, it can be used in brewing. It's more, as far as sugars go, it's more processed and more highly refined. It will give a stronger caramel tone when compared to this here. So what this will do, I'm only going to use 100 grams of it. It is going to give us a small hint of a caramel tone, but not a strong or a noticeable caramel tone. The other thing I really want it to do, it is fermentable, so I want it to lift up our ABV that last a little bit. Remembering we're going for 6.5 to 7% on this brew. The last ingredient we're going to talk about is our yeast. And this is the yeast, guys. The Mangrove Jack's M42 New World Strong Ale Yeast. This was recommended to me by a couple of members in the Facebook group Homebrew Republic Kit Brewing. Like I might have said earlier, great place to bounce ideas around, test recipes and get feedback from people. So this yeast was suggested there. It is called Strong Ale Yeast, but it is particularly well suited to, when I did some reading on it, it is particularly well suited to stouts. The other thing is it's well suited to higher ABV brews. I don't consider what we're doing to be higher ABV, but I did check this brew and it's this yeast, and it's tolerant up to 12%. So if you wanted to with this brew, you could really have a crack at trying to drive the ABV up into the 8 or 9% mark. Notable pieces about this brew, about this yeast, is the ideal fermentation temperature range is 16 to 22 degrees. So in a lot of New Zealand, it will vary depending on where you are. This yeast is going to be really nice to use, especially if you're ambient, brewing at ambient temperatures in late autumn, early spring and through winter. It's a really nice temperature range to support fermentation. One thing I did notice is when I read this, it suggested fermenting in the lower end of that, which I normally would anyway, but it basically suggested getting under 20 degrees when you ferment with this yeast. The reason being is it will give a cleaner profile on the aroma that the esters create from the yeast during the fermentation. So makes sense to me, just keeping the aroma nice and clean and really honing in on the profile we're going for. So all that said, Mangrove Jack's Strong Ale Yeast, recommended fermentation temperature range 16 to 22 degrees. I will be looking to ferment this at 18. I'm going to be putting it in my temperature controlled fridge to hold at that level through fermentation. All that said, too much talking, not enough brewing. I'm going to get this brew mixed up and then I'll see you guys in the garage to pitch the yeast. Cheers! Hey guys, welcome to the garage. Brew number 1 here, Basics Brew, premium brewing yeast, came with the kit. Let's get that lid off and get this yeast pitched. There our team, in we go. That's all there is to it. I'm not going to touch this brew again till it's ready to bottle. I'll still rack off into a bottling bucket, but no findings, nothing else. Let's get this lid on, go from there. Got the brew set up in the temperature control fridge. Target temp is 18, current temp 20, 23 almost. It will keep coming down, obviously, which is fine. And 22 was the top of the recommended fermentation temperature range. So what we're going to do is get this lid off, pitch our yeast, and put our coffee in. Here we go guys. Yeast, Mangrove Jacks, New World, Strong Ale, M42. Remembering the ideal temperature range was for the yeast was 16 to 22. The recommendation was to get ferment below 20 to reduce the esters during fermentation from the yeast and therefore create a cleaner aroma, accentuating the aromas of the stout, in our case coffee, rich dark malt. Let's get that coffee. Alright, so what I got here, hop sock rather, with coffee. Did what I said I would, got a rolling pin out while it was still in the bag, smacked it around a bit, so I guess in some respects it's somewhere between chunky beans and very, very coarse grind. What I've done is tied a piece of dental floss, which has been sanitized as well. So the hop sock and the dental floss were sanitized. Just going to drop it there. That dental floss I'm going to I'll use a piece of tape just to hold it in place on the outside, and that will stop the whole hop sock and dental floss sinking in. Dental floss generally won't break the seal on the O-ring either, so you'll still get a seal. And yeah, other than that, what I would normally do is, once fermentation is finished, is use findings. Not going to in this case. The brew's dark, so I'm not too concerned about its clarity. I will still cold crash at the end of fermentation. Anticipate fermentation could take me up to 2 weeks. Fermentation will be defined as complete with 2 to 3 days of constant final gravity. Have taken my original gravity sample, haven't measured it yet, so I will go and do that. All that said, the next time I see you guys will actually be for official taste test. Welcome back to the official taste test of the Black Rock Miners Stout. Let's get into it. First brew today is our Basics brew. Now I am well late on this brew review. This brew here, the Basics brew, is about 14 weeks in the bottle, and the recipe brew is about 12 weeks in the bottle. So here we go, Basics brew. Check that out. Is that awesome or what? Really, really deep, dark colour, but beautiful, clean finish on it. Pretty good head, but not the best head retention. You can see it falling away quite quickly. This is good. Aroma, first up, as you would expect, the darker, the roasted, the toasty notes coming off. And very much the same going into our flavour profile. What I would say with this brew, having done it with the liquid brewing sugar, is the body is exceptionally light and exceptionally crisp, more so like what you would expect from a lager over a stout. And if we look at, going back to the flavour and aroma profile, if we think about stouts, which for me anyway, bearing in mind this was the second time I brewed a stout, I generally expect a flavour profile with a little bit more depth and strength and richness. And if we look at that as a spectrum, I would say this brew is right at the bottom of that spectrum. The flavour and aroma profile, whilst very nice and very clean, is a bit softer in that context, and I think what that does is creates an exceptionally easygoing flavour profile for a stout. So for someone who doesn't like a stout that comes off too strong in terms of its flavours, in terms of its strength, this is really, really nice. The other thing that I would say, and going back to the body before being really light and crisp, whilst I also think that's potentially a little bit uncharacteristic for a stout, this does potentially make it, the way we did it, a very easygoing and refreshing way to drink what might be a summer stout. So, not bad at all. One thing I would say is, when I first brewed this, I first tried it at 4 weeks, and it felt like it had very much a watery back on the flavour profile. And had I done the review at 4 weeks, I wouldn't have been complimentary of this brew for that reason. Actually, sorry, not the brew, of the way we did it, because I don't think it's the kit, it's the way that we brewed it. What I noticed is that dissipated around the 8 to 10 week mark. So essentially with this brew here, if you were going to do it like this again, number one, be prepared that in its early stages of bottle maturity, it might come off with a watery back. And I think that will take away from the quality and the style of the brew. But that would, and in my case, it did dissipate around, as I said, around the 8 to 10 week mark. So I guess the key message would be prepared to let this bottle mature up to 8 to 10 weeks before you start drinking it. Well, not necessarily before you start drinking it, but before you really get into the moving through the bulk of the brew. And that extra time really has done massive justice to this brew. Interestingly, this is the kit itself. We talked about 8 to 10 weeks there. So something that I say quite consistently is, with me personally, I won't touch a brew until it's 4 weeks in the bottle. Most instructions say you can drink from 10 days. 4 weeks for me is when I'll take my first test. But I generally believe that brews will improve up to around about 8 to 12 weeks, at which point they hit their sort of peak. And so for me, I generally try and leave at least the majority of any given batch as long as I can. And like I said before, what did I say, 12 and 14 weeks or 10 and 12 weeks or something, these are hitting that point. But the reason I picked this guy up here is I noticed this the other day, and basically the final instruction on the kit itself is leave for a minimum of 2 weeks, but it says the beer may be consumed after 2 weeks, but will continue to improve with age up to 6 months. So Black Rock themselves, in relation to this kit, go even a step further than me and basically say if you can bottle mature for longer, the brew will continue to improve. So if I was to wrap, for me personally, if I was to wrap this brew up, it doesn't have it's got the flavour and the aroma profile don't have a big depth or a big richness to them. It's a very easygoing flavour profile in the context of stouts, and it makes it a very easygoing and approachable stout. The way that we brewed this one with the liquid brewing sugar has given it a really light, a really crisp body, which to me makes it feeds into that really easygoing stout, but it also makes it potentially really perfect as a summer brew and a summer stout, making it more refreshing on hot summer afternoons for those who still love a stout. So all in all, not bad. I'd also note, of the friends that tried this as well, it got nods all around. Everyone who tried it, they didn't try it earlier on, they tried it from that 10-week mark onwards. So they were trying it when it had settled down and when the flavour profile of them had improved. And it was liked. Admittedly, the people who tried it were all stout lovers. They liked stouts to start with. But basically, it got nods, and I think in general was an easy crowd pleaser. But the main event, the recipe brew, let's move on. Alright guys, the recipe brew, the piece de resistance of this video. There we go guys, I didn't pour that particularly well, so the head got away a little bit, but check that out. Incredible rich dark colour, same as the other brew, it's cleaned up really nice, and that head is awesome. Really nice kind of chocolatey caramel colour on the head. And the first thing as well to notice is the head retention on this brew is way better than it was on the Basics brew. Right, aroma. I would say that the aroma of this brew is really dominated by the coffee notes. Right, our flavour. Again, very much dominated by the coffee. So, if we back this up, what we were going for was a coffee cream milk stout or a coffee cream stout. What I was worried about, I think I said this earlier, I did worry that potentially I was making the two things I was worried about. Number one, was I using too much coffee? And we talked about this earlier. Second thing I was worried about was I making the recipe too complex? Particularly, yeah, just overthinking it and trying to do too many things, particularly with potentially adding the sugar as well. So, flavour profile. Like I said, very much dominated by that very strong coffee note. A little bit is an understatement. A clear, if we're comparing this to the Basics brew, very much more richness and more depth of flavour coming through from this brew. We did use the dark liquid malt extract, so that's going to do that for us. It's going to give us that extra strength in the flavour, that extra depth and the extra richness. A very distinct sweetness coming through from the brew. Again, completely to be expected. We used lactose in the brew and we knew that we were going to get that. The body and mouthfeel is still very light. What I would say, if I was comparing this to the Basics brew, there is a little bit more body and definitely a smoothness there that we didn't have in the Basics brew. The Basics brew was lighter and crisper. For me personally, I'm not completely happy with the way this has fully turned out. So where I kind of put this is very drinkable, no question about it. We definitely have to make sure we like the flavour of coffee, because like I said, that is the predominant note, but very drinkable. The reason I'm not that happy is I just don't feel it's landed in the best possible place. So first of all, if what we were going for was the coffee cream or the coffee caramel milk stout, where I think this fails is I feel that the coffee flavour has become too overbearing. So basically we use too much coffee. I feel that the sweetness that's coming through from the lactose is not correctly balanced with the rest of the brew, and I feel like there's not quite enough body on the brew. So if we were staying with the coffee caramel milk stout, I would want to see a little bit more body come through, and I would want to try and build into that depth of flavour and that richness a little bit more to balance the sweetness, and I would probably pull back on the coffee. So then if we talk about what I did, because a lot of that could have been, we could have changed it with the way we did this, right? Or the way I did it rather. I added 25 litres of water to the fermenter. What I could have done is not. I could have added just the standard 23, and that straight away would have given us more body, more smoothness. It would have given us a little bit more depth of flavour and a little bit more richness. So that would have started to solve that problem. The other thing that we could have done is actually, instead of just staying at 23, we could have gone the complete other way and actually reduced the volume potentially down to even 19 litres. Now that really would have built the body up as well as the flavour. It would have given us more ABV as well. On ABV, this came out from memory at 6.7%, so it's definitely got a little bit of kick in it. And interestingly, talking to Frank, whose name I mentioned earlier, he essentially approached this brew. He was doing a similar brew. I used 1 can of Miners Stout and 1 can of malt extract. He was using 2 cans of Miners Stout and 1 can of extract, additional extract. So, I mean, that's the other way we could have gone if we wanted to stay at 25 litres, was to add another can of extract, and that would have kind of achieved the same thing in reverse, or from another perspective. So, but despite that kind of criticism from my perspective, like I said, it's actually really drinkable and really enjoyable. I don't have a problem with coffee. I like coffee. So my go-to in the mornings before midday is coffee. I drink espresso coffee and I like long blacks. So I really like the straight coffee flavour. So for me, this isn't actually a problem, and I've been really enjoying drinking it even from that perspective. And the people who have tried this, I think what in this context, what it's come down to is, do they like coffee? Because the people who like coffee have actually really enjoyed this. I was talking to Dion, another person who's a frequent and solid member of the Facebook community, and he was saying really like it and really love it. I mentioned I wanted to pull back on the coffee flavour, and he was like, no, he likes the coffee flavour. So it does work for some people. I spoke to Dion about the sweetness and said, did he feel that the sweetness was out of balance with the brew, and he didn't. So those were his personal perspectives coming across, and I guess that just feeds into the everyone views beer a little bit differently. So albeit I said I wanted to do some things differently to this brew, other people have picked it up and really enjoyed it. One thing I would call out is earlier on, particularly in that 4 to kind of 6 to 8 week period, it had this slight, I don't even know if this is a correct word, but like acidic kind of tone, which I think comes off the raw sugar. And one of my friends noticed it, and their description of it was it's almost like a slight whiskey aftertaste. And I noticed it on the first stout I did as well, and that really falls away as the brew bottle matures. And actually talking about bottle maturing, so again, this one here, I tried at 4 weeks. And what I would say is at 4 weeks, this was a different drinking experience. The flavours and the profile in general hadn't fully settled down. The coffee was way more aggressive in terms of the coffee tone. And I think the sweetness coming through on the end from the lactose was, again, that certainly hadn't settled and mellowed. And then there was that acidic tone as well. So at 4 weeks, drinkable and enjoyable, but this has really matured into a far better flavour and aroma profile, particularly in that 8 to 10 week mark. And again, I would say if you're going to do this, be prepared to let it bottle mature to really get the best out of it. The other thing which has crossed my mind is, coffee, particularly when you start using beans, it really comes down to where the bean is from, what the flavour profile is, what the aroma profile is of that specific bean, who the roaster was, how it's been roasted. And so I think the bean, that not just how much coffee you use, but the specific bean you use will also have a big bearing on the flavour that you get in your finished product. That's probably the other thing I would caution people on. Whether it's a strong flavour or not probably depends on the bean. So overall, generally successful brew, but I wasn't completely happy with where it landed. However, I saw enough potential in the brew that I have actually put my next one down already. It's in the fermenter now and downstairs in the garage. So what did I do? I changed my approach. So I kind of went, rather than going for a milk stout, let's really just simplify this back and probably go more for an imperial stout. I am still going for a coffee stout. So what I've done, can of Miners, can of dark liquid malt extract, a can of liquid brewing sugar, and I've only done 23 litres, I think it was. So I essentially am making some of the changes we just talked about. I am still going to do a coffee brew, but what I'm going to do is probably use about a third of the coffee that we used for this brew. Now I need to go back and check, but I think we used about 100 grams of coffee. I'm going to strip that right back to 30 grams. On this one, like I said, if you really like coffee, it's got a really strong coffee flavour, but that I feel like that coffee tone has become really overbearing on the roasted and toasted flavours coming through from the malt. I want to give them more of a chance to come through. So number one, I'm reducing the amount of coffee that we're using. I am going to use the same bean. Number two, I'm going to put it in a lot later in the brew. So with this brew, I think we had the coffee in from the outset. What I'm going to do this time is put it in a lot later at the 7-day mark of fermentation, and then leave it in there for the final week. So I'm going to put in less and have it in there for less time, which is really going to reduce the transfer of flavour and aroma characteristics, probably aiming more for a bit more aroma to come through and a little bit less impact on the overarching or the holistic flavour profile. So that's my general plan there. But again, all in all, successful brew, I'm really happy with it. I also want at some point to experiment more with brown sugar and as a standalone ingredient. We used raw sugar. I'm quite interested in checking out brown sugar and seeing how that comes across, and I would do that in a stout as well. I think for first crack I'd probably try that. Basically do the same thing again that I just described with my second brew, but do it with the brown sugar only and see how that comes through as a caramel tone. Yeah. What I would say as well is I've really enjoyed this brew way more than some of the brews I've done in the past, and I've always said, like, I love kit brewing. I'm 100% dedicated and a fan of kit brewing. I'm not saying other forms of brewing aren't great. I just haven't tapped out or even finished with kit brewing yet, and I love it for a few reasons. Number one, it's cost effective. It's way more cost effective than buying alcohol in the stores, and it's also more cost effective than some other methods of brewing. I love it because it's time effective. I can set a brew up, like the sections where you see me mixing the brews up. If I exclude setting the video up and the cleanup afterwards, it's like 12 minutes to set a brew up. So I say half an hour you can have a brew on, that's end to end. And then the last piece for me is there's still so much room for experimentation, and you saw what we did in this video. We saw all the different elements we brought together and how we were playing around with ingredients and process. I just think, yeah, the options are there. There's so much scope for kit brewing, and this brew really reminded me of that, and really, I guess, I don't know, it just invigorated my interest again, and really sort of, yeah, piqued my excitement. So thoroughly enjoyed it. We have got some really, really cool brews on at the moment. One that I've got bottled now, so I've got 3 that I've bottled now. One is the Mangrove Jack's Hazy IPA. It's come out really, really well. A couple of interesting learnings for me there. I'll share those in the video in due course. One that I'm super, super excited about. So one of my favourite brews, like if I am out and if I'm drinking, is the Panhead APA Supercharger. And that brew there, I've made a clone brew. It was actually the first brew I've ever made using Brick Road kits. I've done the first taste test. It's 5 weeks in the bottle now, and it has come out exceptionally. I'm really, really happy with that. I've done a second Brick Road kit. I've basically done a sort of a New Zealand style IPA, and it was themed more around being an everyday, easygoing IPA. That's just gone into the bottle, haven't tried it. And in the fermenting now, I already mentioned, got my next stout. So plenty going on, plenty of really cool videos coming up. If you've stuck around this far, thank you, appreciate your support. Feel free to subscribe, give the video and the channel a thumbs up. Your support is appreciated. You guys know if you drop questions and comments below, I engage, I reply. Our website, jump online and check us out. It's www.homebrewrepublic.co.nz. Now if you check out that homepage, what you will also find is links to our Facebook group, which is the Homebrew Republic Kit Brewing community. Great bunch of people in there that are always happy to share the brews they're making and share how they're experimenting and what they're doing and what they think of different kits. So all that said, thanks for joining us. Cheers.